anniversary of Julian's desperate time in Belmarsh and the 10th year of his detention, isolation, and psychological torture. As John Peel just said, the times we live in are so dangerous and so distorted in public perception that propaganda is no longer an invisible government. It is the government. It rules directly without fear of contradiction, and its principal aim is the conquest of us, our sense of the world, our ability to separate truth from lies. WikiLeaks exposed the machinations and strategy of such invisible government, informing and educating the public. The secrets of such governments spilled through the web pages of wikileaks.org more than any other government. The secrets of the US government, the mightiest military power the world has ever seen. A military that brought death and destruction to the civilian population of Hiroshima and Nagasaki without ever facing any consequences, and continued ever since to expand their military capability to the point where they could bring about the destruction of the whole planet with a nuclear arsenal. The US democracy, flawed to the point of hardly being recognized as such, has failed to channel the ingenuity of its people to peaceful works, but fills the pages of its history with the suffering of others, whilst at the same time presenting to the world a Hollywood-style fantasy of exceptionalism, the land of dreams and benevolent power. WikiLeaks publications shatter this dream and the ability to endlessly propagandize, lie, and manipulate domestic and global populations, and controlling their elected leaders to fall in line with the US plans for global domination. WikiLeaks publications expose the strategies on how they plan for war, for example, in Ukraine, and how they conduct a war, for example, in Iraq and Afghanistan. A diplomatic cable which was sent in 2009 by US Ambassador to Russia, William J. Burns, stated in part, NATO enlargement, particularly Ukraine, remains an emotional and neuralgic issue for Russia, but strategic policy considerations also underline strong opposition to NATO membership for Ukraine and Georgia. In Ukraine, these include fears that the issue could potentially split the country in two, leading to violence or even, some claim, civil war, which would force Russia to decide whether to intervene. Additionally, the GOR and experts continue to claim that Ukrainian NATO membership would have a major impact on Russia's defense industry, Russian-Ukrainian family connections, and bilateral relations generally. During his annual review of Russia's foreign policy, January 22-23, Foreign Minister Lavrov stressed that Russia had to view continued eastward expansion of NATO, particularly to Ukraine and Georgia, as a potential military threat. While Russia might believe statements from the West and NATO was not directed against Russia, when one looked at recent military activities in NATO countries, they had to be evaluated not by stated intentions, but by the potential. While Russian opposition to the first round of NATO enlargement in the mid-90s was strong, Russia now feels itself able to respond more forcefully to what it perceives as actions contrary to its national interests. This was an excerpt from a diplomatic cable released by WikiLeaks. And now bring to your mind that the person who wrote this cable knew exactly what he was talking about. He was the US ambassador to Moscow. The same gentleman last year, William J. Burns, became CIA director a whole year before Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. This cable constitutes conclusive proof that the Pentagon and the CIA knew with absolute certainty that Russia's response would be if they threatened to absorb Ukraine into NATO. They knew it and they planned for war. They might as well move President Putin's hands on the global chessboard. Now, the US paints Russia, another empire, as the only responsible party, concealing the fact that they planned this war, they wanted it, and they will make sure it lasts and lasts so they can achieve their military objectives for global domination, not caring about the thousands of dead men, women, and children, whilst they enrich their military industries. Chelsea Manning was part of this US military class. She witnessed the horrors of war and, in an act of moral courage, gave the world this treasure trove of documents from inside the bureaucratic system itself. And so we learned how the US conducts its war through thousands of military reports from the military field, documenting the death of thousands in Iraq and Afghanistan. More often than not, innocent civilians, children, the horrors are endless. We don't just know. Due to WikiLeaks, we have the proof of it. And that is why those US officials who invest, plan, and conduct the wars hate Julian Assange and have relentlessly and obsessively persecuted him, done everything they can to destroy, isolate, silence, persecute, prosecute, incarcerate, torture, and hound him. Lies and lies were spread about him directly by the CIA, including via Luke Harding at The Guardian, when, for example, he published the lie that Trump's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, visited Julian Assange inside the Ecuadorian embassy. They did that to build a false narrative that WikiLeaks helped Trump win and so alienate from WikiLeaks the thousands of Democratic Party voters who read at the web pages of wikileaks.org that the Democratic Party had abandoned its neutrality and conspired against Bernie Sanders becoming their presidential nominee. And these voters were enraged. The lie was planted to silence them. Since November last year, we know that the Guardian journalists involved in researching this story knew that this visit never happened. They knew it because they had asked the security company UC Global for confirmation of the visit, and UC Global had said they had denied such visit ever taking place. Still, the Guardian published a front-page lie to frame Julian Assange. The US is by no means the only villain in the world. But since we are here in the UK, we belong to this alliance. The US is our villain. And this is why we want to hold them to account. Because when the US coughs, the UK jumps, follows, and amplifies. And in this, the persecution of Julian Assange, the UK has been an active partner of the worst kind. The UK security services collaborated with the CIA in the surveillance of Julian Assange. I will point you to the flat opposite at number 18, where the CIA was holding its operation. That's where they have laser microphones. Who could believe such technology existed? They have popularized modern methods of surveillance. That's where they were. And the UK security services were posters underneath their lampposts. The same vehicle week in, week out with its engine running. We know so because we held a vigil here, just where this gentleman is sitting, he's standing there. We held a weekly vigil and we witnessed it.